Throughout the American landscape, there's all kinds of habitat types. There's grassland, open land, wetland, forested land. Each have their own benefits and attractive qualities to a landowner. On today's episode, I'm going to show you multiple types of habitat biomes, as we call them. Each have their own benefits for wildlife, for diversity, but they also affect the value. I hope you enjoy this episode of The American Landman. So I'm walking through an old fallow field here. This is probably about an acre in size, and I'm sure at one point this was a farm field that they probably had crops in. It's the only reason I could think that it's actually kind of rectangular. It was obviously cleared at one point because there's nothing but grass here. And I particularly like to find these features on properties because I think it has a lot of potential. It adds to the overall biodiversity of a property. But I also look at the things that I can do with an old field like this. So this could easily be converted into an orchard perhaps, and have a fruit plot tree. It could obviously be put into a food plot, or maybe both. And when I find these properties and I look on the aerial maps before I ever show up on a property, I get rather excited when I see this. And when I get there, if they look like this, I get really excited because there's so many things you can do to this. And it's definitely a biome type, and grasslands are a biome. And what do I mean by that? Well, biomes are basically types of habitat. You've got hardwood forest, you've got oak savannas, you've got wetlands, and you've got grasslands, and you have many biomes. And the whitetail love these biomes. They like that diversity. I don't particularly like to come into a property where it's all monoculture, all tillable, let's say, all in agriculture, or maybe all wetland or all forest for that matter. I love to find these edges, these different types of habitat types. So when you're looking for property and you see these old fallow fields like this, you know you got something that you can work with. The second type of habitat that I look for are transitional, early successional habitats. They're probably old fields that were cut and maybe reclaimed by nature. Maybe they're just areas that have typically been pastured really hard with cattle, and now they're growing back. And that's what we have here. This is a perfect example. This is on the edge of my property, and here's the fence line right here, as a matter of fact. And gosh, these bugs are crazy today. But as you can see, all the woody browse that's coming in here is starting to thicken up. The trees are coming in. This hasn't been worked for many years, but this type of habitat is fantastic habitat for a lot of reasons. The woody browse in the winter, there's a lot of tips here. The deer are going to be feeding here, and they frankly just love to spend a lot of time here. There's also soft mass in the form of blackberries and other berries. There's forbs, and there's other edible plants that these deer really key in on. And you're going to find that these deer are working these properties and working this edge, and I'll guarantee you that if I got over towards the end, there's a trail that probably cuts the edge, maybe just inside the timber. But these types of open ground are something that really, again, is very appealing to a property. And when I see those on the aerials, as I'm looking before I come and pre-scout them, I particularly key in on this area. Now, one thing you could do here, obviously, is you could come in here and you could clear this, and you could simply mow it. And in a day, half a day, you could clear this out. You could take down these pine trees, you could mow this out, and you'd have a fantastic food plot. But I don't think you necessarily have to do that. You can manage these old fallow fields, and they can be a great food source and for the deer, and it really doesn't cost you much money at all and much effort. And they add, again, to the overall biodiversity of a property, which, again, adds to the resale value. Now, on my property here, Indian Creek, I'm blessed to have a lot of diversity, a lot of habitat types, and I have a couple wetlands. I have basically a wetland that runs right down the middle of my property, and I'm trying to work my way over here right now so I can show you this. This is a wetland. You can see Lucy's already in here doing a little swimming. This is a wetland that stays open year-round. It's probably 3-4 feet in here, and I constantly see ducks and geese coming here, a lot of wood ducks in here. But the deer are also bedded real nearby. This is a freshwater source of fresh water for them. They're bedding actually up on this hillside right over here. That's kind of my sanctuary, but these natural areas like this are really attractive to so many species, and the typical deer hunter may not consider this attractive, but you know, from the standpoint of investment, from the standpoint of aesthetics, saleability, or just multiple uses of a property, I think this is really key. I know I like to see it. I usually come down here in the fall. It's just gorgeous with these pines and the maple, just all blazing colors. And I sit here and I've watched the ducks land in here and can't wait to come back with a shotgun this fall. But riparian wetlands, if you have these on your property, it's a plus. This area of northwestern Wisconsin is an area that I've been working now for about 4 or 5 years, and if you look at the property values in this area, they're probably around $1,400–1,500 an acre on average. Of course, that means some are higher and some are lower, but on average, $1,400–1,500 an acre. But by focusing on these habitat types and pointing them out to the buyers, I'm starting to kind of recreate the mindset of the potential buyers, showing them what's valuable and what they have here to work with, and that results in a higher purchase price. And I've been selling properties in this area at around $1,900 to $1,950 an acre, and that's for non-tillable recreational wooded land. So I've been able to push that price up for the sellers and still give great property values to the buyer. This land, when you look across the state of Wisconsin, and western Wisconsin for sure, you know, $1,500 to $1,900 an acre is a steal. That's a steal, guys, and probably a lot of places throughout the nation. So it's a great area that you can get great value. So you can see now we're walking into more of a hardwood. You notice how the understory is shaded. That's because there's not a lot of sunlight getting in here. And this isn't a hardwood savanna that I'm moving into. We're gonna get up here, it's a little bit better example. But let's go up and take a look at some of these trees and let's talk about them. We're moving into this hardwood savanna. You can see some of the quality of these trees. And it happens to be a couple aspen right there that are at the end of their life. They need to be taken out. But these up ahead are definitely some white oak. Those are money trees for sure. But as you look at them, they don't have a lot of timber value necessarily. This one here's got a nice seam on it, and that's definitely not going to bring you much money, but the one next to it definitely has some money value. There's a couple saw logs on this tree right here, and it's crowning out nice. So this is what an oak savanna looks like, and it's fairly open in here, so it's not great deer hunting habitat because the deer can literally see you 100 yards away. But they do like to come in here. It's shady. In the fall, this is just going to be raining acorns, and that's a plus. It's just another type of habitat, and it's what really drew me to this property. I'm walking into an area that is slowly being reclaimed by these white pine. These are all trees that are kind of volunteer trees that are popping up on their own. And I've thought about, you know, mowing this down and creating a food plot out of this area. But this is kind of a soft edge that I may leave up for a little bit. There's a lot of wildlife habitat. I just almost stepped on a frog. The deer like to bed under here. It's cool and it's shady. And, you know, it just adds to the overall biodiversity of a property. I'd like to see these soft edges. And I'll probably end up just leaving this alone. I just kind of like the looks of it. And there's plenty of room here if I want to put a little food plot, maybe take off some of this field and convert it. I can do that. I'm walking down a trail here on my property. I call this the cathedral because the way these trees kind of come over the top of the canopy over the trail here, and it's just a really cool trail down here. It tends to be cool in here. It's got a lot of pine. The ground is a little bit more acidic, so there's not a lot of underbrush growing up, but just another cool feature. And what I'm walking to is I'm going to take you to this area that I've got some old growth oak timber. And while it's not the best deer habitat, it does add to that biodiversity of a property, which again is key when you're marketing or if you're purchasing a property. You want to find this biodiversity. So we're going to take a look at that. We're going to talk a little bit about the timber value, if any, if you maybe want to thin it, if you just want to keep it as a oak savanna and maybe just manage it for, you know, oak mass. the acorns that it can produce. But it's definitely a feature of a property that if you can find it, it's worth noting. Maybe one of you guys can comment on the type of flower this is. I think this is called a trillium, I believe. And I notice I only see them in the spring, and they're growing here because there's a hole in the sky up above, and they got a little bit flush of sunlight here. And this is what we talk about a lot. When you open up the canopy to sunlight hit the ground, you get a flush of this growth. So I just thought it was a pretty cool looking little feature in this property. It just adds to the overall beauty, and frankly, I just think it's cool. Let's keep looking. Again, the purpose of this video is just to kind of give you guys some ideas of habitat types that you can find on properties. I love seeing this. This biodiversity. Again, you're going to hear me talk about that term over and over. The meeting of biomes, where you've got agricultural field, you've got hardwood timber, which we're going to go into next, and you've got these old fallow fields that are slowly being converted to woodland, and probably still a little bit of room over here for a food plot, and I could probably get a half-acre food plot maybe over here and still have a soft edge. You can kind of see how these trees are slowly progressing across this on their own. They're basically reseeding, and I'll be able to leave some of this alone and maybe still food plot some of that. But again, I keep talking about this biodiversity, meetings of these biomes, edge. That's the key. If you remember anything, remember edge. That's the key to these properties. When I bring my clients out and I show them the areas like this, this is what sells properties. They love to see these big trees. Now, from a habitat manager's perspective, I'm going to be the first to tell you that this is probably not the best habitat for deer. But if you're looking at selling your property and turning it over, nothing attracts buyers better than big mature trees. So even if your entire property isn't covered with them, but you have pockets like this, that can be key. And you definitely want to show your clients there. And if you're listing a property, you want to make it part of your overall presentation, because they definitely like big trees. So here's another great example of one of these oak forests that's all canopied out. The foliage in here is literally 6 inches tall. Nothing's really growing because there's just no sunlight. But if you get over on this side, you'll see how there's definitely an edge down here, and you're getting a lot of secondary growth. And all these little tips are all being bit off. This is all woody browse, and I'm sure these deer were eating on this this spring and throughout the winter. And these bushes are actually 70% or so of their actual diet is this woody browse. So while this is beautiful to look at, it really doesn't do anything from the sake of supporting a healthy deer herd. I like to see it, but you don't want a whole lot of it. Okay, I'm going to show you an excellent example of biome transition. So we just came out of a hardwood timber forest. As you can see, we're automatically transitioning into grassland. I actually have a stand on the hill, as you can see, but you can definitely see the transition, and this is what I'm talking about. These biome transitions are where the deer like to be. I'm probably going to transition this into a food plot down here, but this is exactly what I was talking about. The edge of the woods is given away to a soft edge, which gives away to grassland, and this is a perfect example of that. All right, now I'm going to get you up next to another type of habitat that you'll find on properties. This happens to be a grassland habitat, predominantly pretty wet, and a lot of grass and canary grass. And now this isn't great deer habitat unless, of course, out in the back here is there's maybe some islands. I know for a fact in this one there isn't, but I love to see this. The ducks are definitely landing in here in the spring. I'm sure they're nesting on the edge. And if anything, it creates a little boundary where the deer are going to be moving around on one side or the other. But grassland habitat is nice. Now I'm going to show you a tamarack swamp, and you're going to see a difference. And here's the last example of habitat. This is a tamarack swamp. These pines, as you might call them, are actually deciduous conifers. They lose their needles every year. And I believe they're the only conifer tree that does that. But this is dense, dark, wet. You can see this green moss in here. And when it dries out a little bit, it's great habitat for bear and deer. There's little humps back in there. They like to get up on top of those humps and bed, and they're in complete seclusion. So these tamarack swamps is actually a flowing, living, breathing wetland. The water's actually flowing through here. And as you can see, the bucks like to come and check it out. They know that the does are bedding in here. So just another cool little biome, if you will, that adds to that overall diversity of your property. All right, I'm gonna wrap it up. The heat's coming up and the mosquitoes are coming out, and I'm gonna get the heck out of this swamp. But I hope you found that interesting. So biome. So guys, when you're looking at properties, start to evaluate the types of habitat that you can find on it. The more types, the better. We talked about old fallow fields that could be grassland or maybe converted to food plots or agricultural. We talked about wetlands, grassy wetlands, good duck habitat, great edge, creates traffic movements. We talked about tamarack swamps, good cover, nice cool bedding area, just a great place for a deer or a bear to get into. What else we talk about? Hardwood savannas, great for woody mass, but kind of an open undergrowth with a closed canopy on top. And we talked about early successional fields that probably at one point were either worked or maybe they were burned, and the woody browse is coming back and kind of taking over the area. All these things add to biodiversity, which adds to better hunting experience, whether you're after a game species or a non-game species alike. I hope you found that interesting. Hey, if you like this video, I'm going to be putting more of these out here if I don't eat the bugs. Please hit the subscribe button down below. And if you have any comments or questions, you can give me a message as well. I'm Neil Hauger. I'm a land specialist with Whitetail Properties Real Estate. I'm the American Landman. You're watching the American Landman vlog. Thanks for watching.